The bank statement trembled in my hands, numbers blurring into meaningless shapes as my stomach clenched. 3 missed mortgage payments. Impossible. I checked again, willing the figures to change, but they remained stubbornly fixed on the page, mocking my certainty about our financial stability. I'm Maeve, and until this moment, I thought I knew everything about my life, my marriage, our business. 27 years of marriage teaches you to read between the lines, to anticipate the rhythms of your shared existence. Or so I believed. There must be some mistake, I told the bank representative over the phone, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. We have automatic payments set up. I'm showing those were cancelled 3 months ago, Mrs. Thompson. By your husband. The words hit like a physical blow. Derek hadn't mentioned any changes to our finances. Hell, just last week we'd discussed renovating the guest bathroom. I see, I managed, scribbling down the details. And the new payment arrangement? The account receiving transfers is under Linda Thompson's name. Linda. My mother-in-law. Of course. I ended the call and sat at my kitchen island, the granite cold under my palms. The house felt different now, every familiar surface holding potential secrets. The antique clock Linda gave us for our anniversary ticked accusingly from the wall. The front door opened, and Derek's heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer. Honey? Something smells good. I'd forgotten about the pot roast in the slow cooker, the dinner I'd planned before everything shifted. In the kitchen, I called back, sliding the bank statement under a magazine. He appeared in the doorway, his silver-streaked hair disheveled from the wind, his smile genuine. That's what hurt the most, how normal he looked, how untroubled. Rough day at the office? I asked, watching his face carefully. The usual. Mom stopped by, wanted to discuss some investment opportunities. He loosened his tie, heading for the wine rack. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Funny, I said, my voice hollow. I've been meaning to talk to you too. About the mortgage payments you've been redirecting to your mother's account. The wine bottle slipped from his grasp, shattering against the floor. Red liquid spread across the tiles like blood, seeping into the grout lines. Derek's face drained of color, his mouth working soundlessly. Maeve, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain secretly funneling our money to Linda without telling your wife of 27 years. He stepped toward me, careful to avoid the broken glass. It's not what you think. Mom needed. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare tell me what Linda needed. Tell me what I need, Derek. Tell me why I shouldn't walk out that door right now. 3 days after the mortgage revelation, I came home to find Linda's Mercedes in our driveway, its trunk open and stuffed with designer luggage. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Derek appeared on the front steps, carrying another suitcase. It's temporary, he said before I could speak. Mom's condo is being renovated. How temporary? The words tasted like acid. Just a few weeks. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She's taking the guest room. Linda emerged from the house, immaculate in her cream cashmere sweater. Maeve, darling. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Derek insisted when he heard about my situation. Of course he did. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass. What a surprise. Inside, Linda had already rearranged my living room furniture, pushing my grandmother's antique reading chair into a dark corner. The air reeked of her signature perfume, drowning out the lavender candles I'd lit that morning. I made dinner, Linda announced. Nothing fancy, just Derek's favorite pot roast recipe. The one I taught him growing up. My stomach clenched. Pot roast, the same meal I'd been making when I discovered the diverted mortgage payments. The same recipe I'd perfected over decades of marriage, thinking it was Derek's favorite because it was mine. At dinner, Linda dominated the conversation, her voice honey-sweet as she detailed her renovation plans. The contractor says it could take longer than expected. These things always do. How fortunate you have somewhere to stay, I said, cutting my meat with precise movements. Family takes care of family. Linda reached across the table to pat Derek's hand. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Derek nodded, shoveling food into his mouth to avoid speaking. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Speaking of family, Linda continued, dabbing her lips with a napkin. I was thinking about Grace's wedding next month. Such a shame you two never experienced that joy yourselves. Having children, I mean. The fork clattered from my hand. Derek's head snapped up. Mother. Oh, I'm sorry. Linda's eyes widened with practiced innocence. Was that insensitive? I just meant it must be difficult, watching others live that dream. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood. Excuse me. Maeve, wait, Derek called after me. But I was already halfway up the stairs, my vision blurring. In our bedroom, I locked the door and pressed my forehead against the cool window glass. Below, I could see Linda's Mercedes, claiming its space in our driveway like she'd claimed everything else. My phone buzzed, a text from Sam, coffee tomorrow? You sound like you need to talk. I typed back quickly, yes. And bring those real estate listings you mentioned. Just in case. The office was quiet when I arrived early, determined to find answers in Derek's computer while he attended his morning meeting. Linda's renovation had stretched into its third week, and something about her constant calls with contractors felt off. I hadn't planned on becoming a spy in my own business, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Derek's password hadn't changed in 15 years, our wedding date, of all things. The irony wasn't lost on me. The file labeled Mother's Trust caught my eye immediately. Inside, spreadsheets detailed systematic transfers dating back 18 months. Not just our mortgage payments, everything. Company profits, personal savings, even the emergency fund I'd built over decades. What are you doing? I jumped. Grace stood in the doorway, her face pale. Derek's niece, Linda's granddaughter, looked more like a scared child than the confident marketing director she'd become. I could ask you the same thing, I said, minimizing the screen. Your meeting's not until 10. She closed the door behind her. I know about the money, Aunt Maeve. Grandmother's been. She's been taking everything. My hands stilled on the keyboard. How long have you known? 3 months. Grace's voice cracked. She told me it was temporary, that Uncle Derek agreed to help with her medical bills. But last week, I overheard her on the phone about property in Florida. The pieces clicked into place. The renovation lie. The constant undermining. The financial drain. She's planning to convince Derek to move there with her, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. Grace nodded, tears spilling. She's already bought the house. In his name. My phone buzzed, a text from Derek, where are you? Mother needs signatures for the new business accounts. New accounts. Of course. I have proof, Grace whispered, pulling out a USB drive. Bank statements, recordings of her phone calls, everything. I've been collecting it since I realized. The door opened again. Linda stood there, her smile sharp as a blade. Collecting what, dear? Grace shoved the drive into my hand behind the desk. I slipped it into my pocket as Linda glided into the room. Maeve, you're needed in the conference room. Derek's waiting. Her eyes flickered to the computer screen. Unless you're too busy snooping? Just checking quarterly reports, I said, standing. Grace was helping me understand the new filing system. Linda's gaze settled on her granddaughter like a predator sizing up prey. How helpful of her. Grace, your grandmother needs a word. I caught Grace as I left, trying to convey reassurance I didn't feel. In my pocket, the USB drive felt like a live grenade, waiting to explode our carefully constructed lies. In the hallway, I texted Sam, "Need your lawyer friend's number." Now, the game had changed. Linda wasn't just trying to control Derek anymore, she was trying to erase me completely. Sam's office felt like neutral territory, a safe haven from the battlefield my life had become. She poured coffee while her lawyer friend, Marcus, reviewed the contents of Grace's USB drive. "This is more than just financial manipulation," Marcus said, turning his laptop screen toward me. "These emails between Linda and your accountant, they're discussing backdated documents, phantom expenses. It's fraud, Maeve." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "How much?" "Millions." He scrolled through spreadsheets. "They've been siphoning company profits through shell corporations for at least 2 years. Your signature's on some of these documents." "That's impossible." "I never." "They're forgeries," Sam interrupted, squeezing my hand. "Good ones, but forgeries." My phone buzzed. "Grace, grandmother's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Something about restructuring. Please hurry." Marcus leaned forward. "You have 2 choices. We can take this to the authorities now, or I can attend that meeting tomorrow and catch them in the act." The words tasted like revenge on my tongue. "It's risky," Sam warned. "Linda's ruthless, and Derek made his choice." I stood, gathering my coat. "I need to see something for myself first." An hour later, I stood in front of my childhood home, the place where I'd dreamed of building my own family. The for sale sign looked fresh, my mother's garden overgrown beneath it. After she died, I couldn't bear to sell it. The spare key was still hidden under the loose brick. Inside, dust sheets covered the furniture like shrouds. On the mantel, my wedding photo sat exactly where I'd left it years ago, Derek and me, young and hopeful, his mother standing between us. She'd been standing between us ever since. My phone rang, Derek's number. "Where are you?" His voice sounded strained. "Mother's worried." "Is she?" I traced the edge of our wedding photo. "Tell me something, Derek. When did you forge my signature on those transfer documents?" Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Maeve, please come home. We can talk about this." "Home?" I laughed, the sound echoing in the empty house. "I'm standing in our real home, the one you promised we'd renovate together. Remember? Before your mother convinced you to buy that mansion instead?" "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I set the wedding photo face down. "See you at tomorrow's board meeting, Derek." I think it's time everyone understood. After hanging up, I texted Grace, "Get me everything you can on those Florida properties." "And Grace? Be careful. Your grandmother's watching." In my childhood bedroom, I opened my old jewelry box. Inside lay the key to our company safe, the one Linda didn't know about. The one where I'd kept my own records, just in case. Tomorrow would change everything. I just had to survive until then. The boardroom felt like a tomb as I laid out copies of the evidence in front of each chair. Grace's Florida property documents. Bank statements. Forged signatures. 27 years of marriage reduced to a stack of betrayals. Paul Jenkins arrived first, his face grave. "Maeve, Linda's calling for a vote to remove you from the board." "I know." I straightened the papers at my place. "She's been planning this for months." Derek signed the motion this morning. My hands stilled. Even expecting the betrayal didn't lessen its sting. Board members filtered in, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock as they reviewed the documents. Linda swept in last, Derek trailing behind her like a shadow. She froze when she saw the papers. What's the meaning of this? Her voice could have frozen hell. Funny, I was about to ask the same thing about these Florida properties. I projected the deeds onto the screen. Purchased with company funds, through shell corporations. In Derek's name. Derek's face drained of color. Mother, you said. Not now, dear. Linda's smile turned razor sharp. Maeve, you're clearly upset about the restructuring. Perhaps it's best if you. If I what? Disappear quietly? Like the millions you've embezzled? I turned to the board. Everything's documented. The fraud. The forgeries. The shell companies. You have no proof. Grace stood, hands shaking. Yes, she does. I gave it to her. Linda's mask cracked. You ungrateful. That's enough. Paul's voice cut through the chaos. These allegations are serious. We need to. What we need, Linda interrupted, is to vote. Now. She pulled out a document. I moved to remove Maeve Thompson from. Before we vote, I said quietly, you should know the SEC received copies of everything this morning. And Derek? I met his eyes for the first time. I filed for divorce an hour ago. The room erupted. Derek lunged forward. You can't. Can't what? Protect myself? The company? Or did you think I'd keep playing happy families while you and your mother destroyed everything we built? Linda's laugh cut like glass. Built? You were nothing before us. Tell her, Derek. Tell her about the real reason I had to step in. Derek's face contorted. Mother, please. Tell me what? I looked between them, seeing something darker in Linda's eyes. Should I tell her about the baby, Derek? The one you lost before you met her? The reason you'll always choose me? The room went silent. Derek's hands trembled as he reached for me. Maeve, I can explain. I stepped back, my world tilting on its axis. Choose, Derek. Right now. Your mother's lies or the truth. Because I'm done being the other woman in my own marriage. The boardroom door burst open. 2 FBI agents stepped in. Perfect timing, I said, gathering my papers. They'll want to speak with everyone. Especially you, Linda. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about surviving them. The FBI's questioning lasted hours. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched Linda weave her web of lies while Derek sat slumped beside her. Looking older than I'd ever seen him. Grace appeared at my elbow with coffee. They're reviewing the offshore accounts now. Good. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. Did you tell them about the safety deposit box? She nodded, then hesitated. Aunt Maeve, there's something else. Something grandmother said about Uncle Derek's past. Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. Whatever Linda's claiming about Derek's lost child. It wasn't just a child. Paul Jenkins stepped into the room, holding a weathered manila envelope. It was his wife. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor. First wife, Paul continued. Before you. She died in childbirth. Linda. She blamed Derek. Said if he'd listened to her about the pregnancy risks. The room spun. 27 years of marriage, and I'd never known. All those times Linda had weaponized my infertility while Derek sat silent, carrying this weight. Through the glass, I watched Derek finally push away from his mother's side. He walked toward me, but I backed away. Don't, I whispered. Just. Don't. Maeve, please. His voice cracked. I wanted to tell you so many times. When? Between letting your mother steal our money and planning your secret Florida escape? I never wanted Florida. Mother said. He stopped, realization dawning. She used it against me. All of it. Catherine's death, the baby, you. Linda's voice cut through the room like a blade. I protected you. After what happened with Catherine, you needed me. You'll always need me. The FBI agent cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson, we're not finished. Oh, I think we are. Linda's smile turned vicious. Derek, darling, tell them about the real embezzlement. About how Maeve's been skimming profits for years. Show them that evidence we discussed. My blood froze. The fabricated documents I'd discovered in the safe, the ones I thought were meant to frame Grace. They'd been meant for me all along. Derek looked between us, the weight of 27 years hanging in the balance. Agent Crawford, he said quietly, I'd like to make a full confession. About everything. Starting with what my mother made me do to my first wife. Linda's scream of rage echoed through the building as they led her away. But it was Derek's silence that shattered what remained of my heart. I walked out of the office without looking back, leaving behind the shards of 2 marriages and one man's broken soul. Sometimes winning feels exactly like losing. Linda's bail hearing drew a crowd. I sat in the back row, watching her perform for the judge, the grieving mother, the misunderstood grandmother, the pillar of society wrongly accused. Her designer suit couldn't hide the steel beneath her smile. Derek testified first, his voice steady as he detailed decades of manipulation. The lost child. The dead wife. The carefully cultivated guilt that bound him to his mother's will. Then came my turn. Mrs. Thompson, Linda's lawyer began, isn't it true you orchestrated this entire situation to seize control of the company? No. I met Linda's eyes across the courtroom. I orchestrated it to free my husband. Linda's mask slipped. Liar. You never loved him. You just wanted order, the judge warned. But Linda was already on her feet. Tell them, Derek. Tell them how she trapped you after Catherine died. How she. Mother, stop. Derek's voice cut through her tirade. Catherine died because you convinced me she was too weak for motherhood. Just like you tried to convince me about Maeve. The courtroom fell silent. I did everything for you, Linda whispered. You did everything for yourself. Derek stood. And I let you, because facing the truth about Catherine was harder than believing your lies. Linda's composure shattered. She would have died anyway. The pregnancy was too risky. I saved you from watching another wife destroy herself trying to give you children. I saved you from Maeve doing the same. Saved him? I couldn't stop the laugh that escaped. You destroyed him. Every decision, every choice, you twisted it all to keep him dependent on you. But you made one mistake, Linda. And what's that? She sneered. You thought breaking him would break me. Instead, it showed me who he really was, a man worth saving from you. Your Honor, Linda's lawyer interrupted, my client. Your client just confessed to involvement in Catherine Thompson's death, the judge said quietly. Bailiff, take her into custody. As they led Linda away, she turned to Derek one last time. Everything I did was for love. No, Mother. Derek's voice was gentle. Everything you did was for control. And I'm done being controlled. He walked toward me, stopping just short of touching. I know it's too late for us. It was too late the moment you chose her lies over our truth. I know. He smiled sadly. But watching you fight for me, it helped me finally fight for myself. I stood, gathering my coat. Goodbye, Derek. Maeve? His voice stopped me at the door. I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough to deserve your kind of love. I didn't look back. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about saving yourself from becoming them. The real estate sign came down from my childhood home as Grace helped me carry in the last box. My mother's garden needed work, but spring was coming. Time enough to bring things back to life. Uncle Derek signed the company over to me, Grace said, unpacking kitchen items. He's moving to Seattle. Starting fresh. I nodded, arranging my grandmother's teacups in the cabinet. The same ones Linda had dismissed as common all those years ago. You'll make a better CEO than any of us. Because I learned from your mistakes? Because you learned from our silence. The doorbell rang. Sam stood on the porch with Paul Jenkins, holding a bottle of wine. Housewarming, she said. Though technically, you're just coming home. We sat in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of redemption. Paul cleared his throat. The board approved your consulting firm's contract. 3 years, exclusive rights to restructure the company's management. Helping other women recognize financial abuse and manipulation, Sam added. It's perfect for you. It's necessary, I corrected, thinking of Linda in her prison cell, still believing love meant control. Of Derek, finally free but forever marked by her version of devotion. Grace's phone buzzed. Grandmother's appeal was denied. 20 years, minimum. The wine tasted sweeter somehow. Not victory, something quieter. Peace, maybe. I have something for you, Paul said, pulling out an envelope. Derek asked me to give you this before he left. Inside was a key and a deed. Our vacation cottage in Maine, the one place Linda had never visited, never tainted. Where Derek and I had once planned a future. He signed it over to your consulting firm, Paul explained. For women who need a safe place to rebuild. My throat tightened. In the end, Derek had found his courage. Too late for us, but maybe just in time for others. A young woman appeared at my garden gate, clutching a business card. I'm sorry to interrupt. The women's shelter gave me your number, said you could help. She twisted her wedding ring. My mother-in-law. I recognized the fear in her eyes, the shame in her shoulders. The desperate need to believe love shouldn't hurt this much. Come in, I said, standing. Let me put on some tea. Grace squeezed my hand as I passed. Sam and Paul exchanged knowing looks. They understood this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about recognition. About breaking the cycle of silence that lets manipulation masquerade as love. In my mother's garden, surrounded by witnesses to both my breakdown and my rebuilding, I finally understood. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free and helping others find their way to freedom too. The young woman followed me inside, her steps uncertain but determined. Like mine had been, not so long ago. Like mine were now, but for entirely different reasons.